top 10 suburbs for property investment in Melbourne.
People want to live in these locations. They want to stay there long term.
It's a perfect SMSF location as well.
It's had over 10% growth in the last 12 months.
It's not showing signs of slowing.
And the most affordable out of our top 10 suburbs to buy in.
Welcome to the Melbourne Property Podcast. I'm Sky.
And I'm Lindsay.
And we're your hosts and Melbourne property experts. This podcast is your weekly source for insights, data and tips on navigating the ever-changing Melbourne property market.
Whether you're buying an investment property or your dream home, stay tuned for the next 30 minutes as we give you exclusive data and trends that will shape your next property purchase.
And please remember, this information is general in nature and should not be considered financial advice. If you'd like a more personalised conversation, book in a call with the Conversions Buyers Agents team and we'll take it from there. Now let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Melbourne Property Podcast. Super excited today to run through our top 10 suburbs for property investment in Melbourne in 2026. Now, we did this last year in 2025. It was our best performing episode. Everyone wanted to listen to it. Everyone downloaded our report that we had. So today we're going to break down our top 10 suburbs. The link to download this report is in the show notes. Ideally, you stick around and you listen to this. But if not, you can go and download that report, check out those 10 suburbs. So last year, we used a pretty defined brief. So it was basically the most common brief we were getting. We took a price range, I think it was like 650 to 850, maybe 800 and below, and kind of spread out 10 suburbs from the 300. So today it's going to be a bit different. We're going to use again what we're seeing as the most common brief with a few tweaks. So we're going to break that down. But before we do, Lindsay, good to see you again. How are you traveling and what are you excited about for today?
I'm travelling well, no complaints from me over here. Today I am just excited to see what we've come up with for this episode and talk our listeners through how it differs to last year. There may be some familiar faces there though.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you, Sky? How are you going?
Yeah, doing good. Yeah, new year. Things are ticking along well. Can't complain.
Shall we kick off with your biggest win for the week?
Our new employee. So I think we're happy to announce now, we've got a guy, his name's O'Sheen. He's going to start with us very soon. He's based in Geelong. And we've also, as I said, we've got a lot of stuff happening in Geelong as well. He's based on the ground in Geelong. So we're super excited about that because we are buying a lot of property there. Not technically part of Melbourne, so I'm going to park that conversation. But it is great to have O'Sheen on board. What about yourself?
Well, you mentioned the new office space, and I'm going to sort of tap onto that. My favourite thing is that the coffee shop that I absolutely love, Little Z, they've opened a new space, and it's within walking distance of the new office space. So I'm looking forward to having both great coffee at home and great coffee in the office.
We'll jump straight into it, I think, because there's a lot to unpack in this episode. So we started from our 300-ish suburbs in Melbourne, worked down to a list of 10. We had to cut a couple away. That was a bit more manual of part of the process. And I think we're talking, it was 12 suburbs. We might chuck those in as a bonus at some point. But let's talk about the brief, because as I said, the brief is different to last year's one, where it was a very generic kind of, here it is. This year, we've tweaked the brief to reflect more what we're seeing both from clients, inquiries, but to actually pick the best performing suburbs this year. Last year, it was like, here you go, across a range of kind of price points. Today, we're going to go from those kind of colder markets trending warm to warmer markets to trending hot. And the main reason for that is because the most common requirement we're getting at the moment from clients is they're not here to buy one property. They're here to buy one property to then get equity out within 12 months, within 2 years, to get into the next property. Using that equity as a deposit. So instead of just talking about good suburbs, we've actually found, well, here's 10 suburbs that are going to help you get to those goals.
So the equity extraction timeline is quite short here.
Exactly, yeah. So the suburbs we bought in last year all kind of met this brief. However, they didn't marry up with that report. So we thought, you know what, let's keep it more consistent. Let's actually talk about some of the suburbs we are buying in, we have been buying in, and we're going to continue to buy in for clients. Again, we're not buying in all these suburbs, and we probably won't buy most of these suburbs, but there are some in here, some little gems that I think will be some of the best performing markets in Melbourne this year.
Very good. So why don't we run through the key data points and methodology first and break down exactly what we've narrowed this brief down to. So we'll start with typical house price, budget, always really important.
Yeah, and so again, as I said, this is reflective of what feedback we're getting from clients and what people are wanting to buy. And so we're talking the price point of around $850 to $1.2 million. So that's the most common, whether it's investors, owner-occupiers that we're helping are in that kind of space too, particularly in that kind of sub-950 range, but also SMSF purchases. And I think you mentioned in a previous podcast, we're also looking at this price point for ourselves for an SMSF purchase. So lots of scope to buying in these suburbs we're speaking about. A couple of caveats to that as well. This is based off the typical house price as well. So you can actually get in cheaper into these suburbs. So if we say it's $1 million suburb, you can still get in there for $850, $900 sometimes, depending how well you buy. But if you're buying off market, the condition of property. So don't let that put you off. If you've only got, say, $800K to spend, you will be able to get into some of these suburbs.
Okay, next we have stock on market. So what have we limited that to here?
Yeah, so stock on market, we've kept that out at 1.5%. I think if we were going for a kind of a cooler market or a market that's going to perform great over the next 3 to 5 years, we'd probably go up to around 2, even maybe 2.5%. But for us, because we're talking about these markets going from warm to hot, we want that to be 1.5%. We want to see really limited supply of current properties available for sale.
Mm-hmm. And another key one, and we talk about this a lot, is affordability. So have you put any restraints around the affordability index here?
We did. And I mean, it doesn't sound affordable, but 45 years was what we used. So we've gone off from 45 years based on, I guess, local incomes versus the property price in that suburb. So that's kind of the metric we use there.
I think for this price point, that's appropriate as well. So if you were looking at a more affordable price bracket for typical house price, then you'd probably want to see that affordability years to own a lot less.
Exactly. Moving through, I guess, the other requirements we had. So we're using the ERSAD score again. So again, that's, I guess, an indicator of socioeconomic status used by the ABS. So we use that one sometimes. We don't use it all the time. If we're buying at a sub 700K brief, we don't care about it as much, to be honest. So we'll buy in locations that have an ERSAD score of 1, which is the lowest, and 10 being the highest. It doesn't actually correlate that well. Whereas when you move up in price, you do actually want to see that ERSAD score rise because there is backed by data, particularly if you listen to the guys over at HTAG, you do want to see that ERSAD score. So we've set that as a minimum of 4. So if you had an ERSAD score of 1, 2, 3, you're not going to make this list.
And inventory levels, what is that limited to?
Yeah, so I've kept that at 2 months. And for those that haven't heard inventory levels before, what we're saying is that if no new properties come to market or listed for sale, it would currently take 2 months for all existing stock to be sold, to be absorbed by the current market demand. So that's what we're saying there. So basically, as they're saying, all the suburbs on this list, there's currently less than 2 months of inventory, which is exactly what we want to see for that short to medium term capital growth.
And can you talk us through price growth over the last 12 months? Are there any restrictions there, and why? Like, what's your thought process behind that?
Yeah, so this is the one that's probably the most different from last year's report. So we're talking about markets that have grown between 7 and 15%. So we've picked that because that's a good I guess middle ground in terms of it's no longer a cold market, but it's also not a booming hot market where it's seen 20% capital growth. So we've lost suburbs like Frankston North, although it missed out on the ERSAD score as well, and a few others that have grown too much. But also we don't want to get into the ones for this brief that are still negative growth or just 1 or 2%. So we've really kind of picked that kind of warm to hot spot market. So again, there's lots of these markets across the country. There's hundreds of them. In Melbourne, there's not that many because they're either very slow growth, a couple that have actually exceeded it, but this is the kind of sweet spot if you want that immediate equity uplift.
Mm-hmm. Couple more points to run through. So the building approvals ratio, we got that at less than 1.5%, and hold period. So hold period is greater than 7 years. So that's going to ensure that people want to live in these locations, they want to stay there long term, and that's going to have that own occupier demand continuing.
Exactly. Yeah, the longer someone's holding the property, again, over time, it's less supply kind of coming to the market. Like, I think we're going to see this reflected in a few other locations where they're less desirable suburbs. People go in there, they buy it, and then they're selling within 2 years. Again, it doesn't drop the number down with one sale, but we're seeing it in places like Clyde North, other locations where we spoke to someone recently that bought up in Wallert, house and land package, first home buyer, got into it because that's all they could get into and they wanted a newer style house, realised it's actually not where they want to live, and so they're selling it within 2 years. So that's the kind of stuff that you can see in the data, and we're trying to avoid for, I guess, that longer term growth.
And the other one, which is also probably related, is the owner-occupier percentage. So we want to be looking at suburbs where owner-occupiers make up at least 60% of the local demographic.
Yeah, usually we'd put that more around that kind of 70% mark. And this is a reflection of because I guess we're more flexible on this because we're chasing that short-term capital growth, that medium-term capital growth. And the other reason is because we got a bit of feedback because in our last report, we didn't have Frankston North in it, and no one was accusing us of lying, but we've got a lot of property in Frankston North, and it didn't meet the metric of that number. So it's about 50-50 owner occupiers to renters. That didn't stop us buying because of what we're seeing on the ground. We obviously love the suburb. But again, I wanted to be more flexible for this brief. So I guess hopefully at the end of the 12 months, this list is more reflective of where we've been buying than maybe last year's was.
Very good. Well, shall we tuck into these top 10 suburbs?
Sounds good. Let's get. Let me have a drink of water first, and then we'll get going. But maybe you can intro us with suburb number 1, which is Sandhurst.
Yeah. So we're actually going to order these from the highest typical price to lowest typical price. So if you want to find out what the most affordable suburb on this list is, you'll have to stick around to the end. Like you said, Sky, suburb number 1, we've got Sandhurst, located 36 kilometres southeast of Melbourne CBD, and no surprise, in the Frankston LGA. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about the Frankston LGA on this podcast, so listeners won't be surprised to hear that, but we haven't spoken a lot about Sandhurst, and a lot of that's because of the typical house price, which is sitting at $1.12 million.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of the more premium suburbs in that Frankston LGA. Like, for those that are familiar with it, like, we know people personally, like friends that have moved down that way. It's got a really kind of premium feel to it as well. It's like its own little estate. Interesting as well, and this actually puts up some of our clients from buying there. There is an owner's, like a body corporate, because it is such a nice estate. It's essentially, I think it's about $1,000. Like, it's not like strata and other things you see in like apartment buildings where you're paying for elevators and pools and that kind of thing. It's more like landscaping, keeping.
There are 2 golf courses.
Yeah, 2 golf courses, gyms. It actually includes a little bit of stuff. But again, it's and the mindset initially is, oh, no, I don't want to have owners corp or body corporate. But in this case, and reflective of how nice the location is, what it actually provides, and also what growth we're expecting from it, it's a cost that we're, I guess, happy to eat as an investor.
I guess if you look at it, it's not detracting owner-occupiers from buying and living there. So if you are an investor looking for those owner-occupier-driven suburbs, then you have to factor that in as well. Exactly.
So I guess two comments for it. One is obviously get the those body corporate minutes, everything reviewed as part of the conveyancing process, which we've obviously done for clients that are buying there. But just keep in mind that because it has such owner-occupier appeal, there's not many rentals available, which again is great from an investment perspective because we are seeing that being able to command a premium rent. So the rent yield, despite being a $1.1 million kind of typical house price, the rent yield is actually really good. And again, it's probably not reflected in the data, but what we're seeing on the ground, you probably sneak over that 4% mark.
Shall we go through the data in more detail then?
Sounds good.
So Sandhurst growth over the last 12 months, it's up 8%, which is pretty good. Renter to owner ratio, so only 13% renters for the suburb. Affordability is actually really good, particularly for this price point. So affordability is at 37 years to own.
Yeah, and I think it's reflective of 2 things. One is obviously it's only just starting to move up in price, but 2, it speaks to the demographic that's there. And this is obviously based off the incomes. High income area, you do have a lot of, I guess, kind of older generations as well. Like it's by no means a retirement village, but a lot of people who bought in there 10-ish, 20 years ago are still there now on good incomes. We are buying some of that stock at the moment, so people that are looking to downsize, we're buying some of those properties. But yeah, it is quite interesting to see that affordability index kind of in that sub 40 range.
Stock on market is 0.51%, so not a lot of supply at all. Inventory, 1.55 months. The hold period, 9 years, so that aligns with this particular brief. And days on market is at 35.
And when it comes to vacancy rate, we're sitting at 0.4%. So again, basically no properties available to rent in the suburbs. So I think it really stacks up quite well from an investment perspective.
Yeah, so that rent is typically around $642 per week for Sandhurst.
Very good. Anything else you wanted to share on that one?
I still haven't been to the prestigious Sandhurst Club, so definitely need the club that's there. So definitely need to check that out.
All right, moving on to suburb number 2, Chelsea Heights. One that's obviously I guess you're more familiar with, particularly with some owner-occupied clients as well. So maybe give us a little bit of a rundown of that one, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so it's another southeastern suburb. It's just inland from the beach. So you've got the suburb Chelsea beachside and then Chelsea Heights inland, about 30 kilometres southeast of the Melbourne CBD. Typical house prices in Chelsea are just over 1 million, so $1,085,000. We have noticed an increase in first home buyers, particularly young families wanting to buy in Chelsea Heights. Part of this is driven by lifestyle factors, such as being close to the beach. You've got the Chelsea train station on the Frankston line nearby and relative affordability. But a lot are also moving to the area for school zones. So part of that is because the current principal at Chelsea Heights Primary School, his name is Stephen Capp. He's actually one of Melbourne's leading educators. So for those that know, we're quite familiar with the Bentley area, and Stephen Capp was a leading educator at Bentley West Primary when they were going through their reforms. So they are now one of Melbourne's leading primary schools. So Bentley West Primary School is the top government primary school in Melbourne, and a lot of that's because of these reforms that Stephen Capp took the school through. So they're that sort of explicit learning style, very evidence-based. Chelsea Heights Primary School is now going through a similar sort of transition and getting really great results. So naturally, we're seeing a lot of young families wanting to live in those areas.
I mean, yeah, it's not insights that I usually pick up from the investment side. So it's obviously super useful because, yeah, you got that little insight into why I think it's going to be a really good performing area, particularly for homeowners, but obviously investors can make use of that as well. So that's a nice overview, nice little snapshot into what's happening in the inner workings of the suburb. From a data perspective, though, what are we seeing there?
Well, I was going to move on to coffee and talk about the
sorry.
lack of coffee culture,
Sorry,
but you know,
me jumping into the data.
insights.
I'm interested, but I want to see what it looks like from a data perspective. So yeah, how about I'll do the data. You get cover off your coffees, and we'll go from there.
All good. Let's go into the data. So as I said, just over $1 million at $1,085,000 for typical house price. That has come up 9%. So 9% growth in the last 12 months for Chelsea Heights.
Yeah. So the renter to owner ratio again, really quite good. So it's 87%. Kind of own occupied, 13% renters, and that affordability metric, so in terms of years to own, is at 44.29. So again, it's up there. Most of the suburbs we're going to talk about today are in that kind of 40, 44 kind of range. Sandhurst was obviously a bit lower, but yeah, I think it was still a nice little pocket. Stock on market, 0.27%. So again, basically no supply, and inventory levels at 1.22 months.
And a really solid hold period as well. So 12.68 years for the hold period there. Days on market also really competitive at 20 days. So plenty of demand for buyers looking in Chelsea Heights.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the tightest on the list. Obviously, when we go up in price, that days on market number does kind of sit up a bit higher, particularly because lots of auctions in that space and a few other things. But 20 days for this market for a kind of well-known pocket of Melbourne is obviously quite tight, given what we're seeing across the board.
Yeah, the vacancy rate is probably a little higher than most on this list though, so that's sitting at 2.3%. But again, that's a balanced vacancy rate, so no concerns with that.
Yeah, yep. Very good. And we're looking around 610 for a week, the median rent. So again, something to factor in there.
All right, I think that's probably enough for Chelsea Heights, unless you want me to talk about caffeine.
I think cover it off. I feel like I've cut you off there. So cover off the coffees and then we'll move on to the next.
Well, I was actually going to say I haven't found a decent coffee shop yet in Chelsea Heights. So I generally go to Jack the Lad in Chelsea, so it's on the Nepean Highway there, but you can also take a stroll along the beach. So even if you're in Chelsea Heights, recommend heading over.
So it was actually a request for a coffee shop, not
it
actually
was,
giving.
Yeah, it was very important.
Okay, yep. All right, moving on to number suburb 3. And to be honest, I don't know this one that well. So we're actually talking about Greenvale. So Greenvale up to the north now. So we're getting out of the southeastern pocket. Typical house price of 1.084. So again, what are we, 20 Ks north of the CBD, so over $1 million. What can we get for that? What kind of properties are we talking about here?
Yeah, so I think Greenvale has a bit of a reputation. I've heard some people refer to it as the Toorak of the north.
Right.
But I've heard that term a few times now. I think Berwick has been, there's a few out there. So
there's a few Tooraks in Melbourne.
There are a few different Tooraks. But part of that's because there used to be a lot of sort of mega mansions in the older parts. So in the newer areas, not so much. They are smaller blocks and your typical house sizes, but that sort of connotation has continued. So it's not what you see for a lot of the surrounding suburbs. It's quite a unique suburb itself. Yeah. A lot of family-friendly appeal, though, which is sort of what we like to see in these owner-occupier-driven suburbs.
Yeah, nice. Very good. Okay, and just like Chelsea Heights, it's up around 9% over the last 12 months, which again is in that 7 to 15% that we were aiming for these suburbs. Renter-to-owner ratio, again, 88% owner-occupier, which is exactly what we want to see. Affordability, 44 years, almost bang on with Chelsea Heights, despite being 50, 60 Ks apart. And again, all the other numbers we'd like to see. So stock on market, 0.32%. Perfect. Inventory levels, less than a month, so 0.89. So far, of all the ones we've gone through so far, it has less than a month's worth of stock. So basically, if no new properties are listed for sale, every property in the suburb is going to be gone in less than a month. So that's a really tight, and we do want to see that. Whole period, a little lower than I expected, to be honest, 7.85. So again, I'd like to see which way that's trending, because you'd want to see that, particularly for an older kind of established suburb, you'd want to see that a little bit higher, I would say. So just maybe keep a watch on that. And the days on market number, this is where it's a bit different, 38 days. So that's a little bit up there, which again, if it is as described, this is the Tirac of the North, it doesn't surprise me if you got $2-3 million houses maybe floating around. The bigger ones, they are going to sit there for longer and drag that days on market number up. So, and vacancy rate at 3.2%. So again, a little bit higher as well. Particularly there's some newer stock coming online that could be contributing to that. So not the perfect suburb. And to be frank, it reminds me more of one of the suburbs that we had in our last report, where it looks good, generally speaking. It's probably not somewhere we're going to buy a lot of property, to be honest, because it doesn't tick everything. But it's good to have this one on the list as well.
Yeah, and that rent is sitting at $522 per week for average rent, which is a little lower than most on this list.
The yield at 2.5%, obviously not ideal. Again, I'd carry that with you could get definitely better than that. And we've seen this in some other markets down south we've been looking at recently, where if you've got lots of $3 or $4 million properties transacting, but the rents are actually pretty good, the difference between the two, you're still going to get that kind of on a median or typical house price, you're going to see really low yield, when in actual fact you can get better than that if you buy well and the right price point.
That's about all I have to say for Greenvale. Yep. In the Hume LGA.
Yeah, Hume LGA doing quite well, particularly at the bottom end, but it'll be interesting to see how someone like Greenvale performs over the next 12 months.
Exactly. Let's move on to suburb number 4, though, Langwarrin.
Yeah, so Langwarrin, obviously one of my favourite suburbs.
Yes.
We've spoken about it a little bit on the podcast, but not as much because it didn't actually make last year's report. The main reason being that the median price was actually above the range we were targeting. So when we worked through the numbers, I was glad to see it pop up. Gives me more scope to talk about it. But Langwarrin, for those that don't know, we bought a lot of property there last year. So a lot of talk is around Frankston, but when I say Frankston, sometimes I actually mean Frankston and surrounds. Frankston, Sky, Langwarrin, Carrum Downs, generally the suburbs, obviously Frankston North as well. Seaford as well. We didn't buy as much in Seaford or in Sandhurst last year, but that is obviously changing. But Langwarrin, probably my pick of the bunch, to be honest, for 2026. Bought a lot of property there, still buying property there for some time. We got some of our best off-market deals last year were in Langwarrin. Really good suburb, family friendly. I've actually heard some other people describe the trend incorrectly. So I've heard people saying, now Frankston's too expensive. People are going to cheaper suburbs in Langwarrin. I was like,
it's not cheap.
No, Langwarrin is more expensive. I would say, generally speaking, better suburb in terms of owner-occupier appeal and the feel to it. So it's not like a ripple effect of money going to poorer suburbs. It's the opposite. It's actually Frankston's now has risen so much, is now on par with Langwarrin. So other people are like, you know what? Maybe I'll start buying in Langwarrin now as an owner occupier, that is, because it is a great suburb.
Yeah, you can sort of get those larger blocks there, very family friendly, great schooling options, and it's still only 5 to 10 minutes to the beach. So whilst it's not beachside like Frankston is, it's not far at all.
Exactly, yeah. And it has a completely different feel when you're driving through. Obviously, you got Coringal, part of Frankston, which is a kind of older area, and then you get into Langwarrin, and the houses are newer. Sometimes it's just bigger houses, bigger blocks, all that type of stuff, and just has a really nice feel to it.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about schools just quickly, so the Woodlands Primary School there is quite sought after, so recommend trying to get in the zone for that one. But in terms of secondary schools, there's only the one, so you've only got Elizabeth Murdoch. So if you're looking at school zones, it is a little different to Frankston, where when you're in Frankston, you're really trying to target the Frankston High School zone. Actually, I probably should have saved that for later, who knows? Might be a discussion for another suburb. But anyway, you don't need to be zoned for the high school in Langwarrin.
Well, if we take a look at the data now, so the typical house price now is $1.06 million. It's getting up there. Having said that, like I'm working on off market at the moment in the 700s. So you can get in there, and that's not like a full renovated house. That is a 3-in-1 brick house on a good size block. So although it sounds scary, the typical house price, it is reflective of the suburb though, because there's a lot of really nice $1.3, $1.4 million obviously properties as well. But Langwarrin, probably my pick of the bunch off this list. So keep listening. There's some other good ones on there, but let's break the numbers down a little bit. So this is why I like it as well. So it's at 8% growth over the last 12 months, which is why it didn't make our top 10 suburbs from capital growth perspective. I think we did end of last year. And I did reference Langwarrin in there without naming it, basically saying that like there is a suburb that we're doing a lot of buying in that didn't make this kind of list. And again, because it is that little bit priced a bit higher. So it wasn't like a bottom quartile suburb where it's going from 650 to 850. It is that little bit higher, but I think there's lots of growth to come this year.
It's probably the lowest growth for the entire LGA overall as well.
Potentially,
if you break it down suburb by suburb. Yeah. If we take a look at the rent to owner ratio though, 18% renters, so that's what we like to see. Years to own is 44, so great on the affordability index there. Stock on market is 0.2%, so really tight supply, like all of these suburbs. Inventory levels about half a month, so 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, there's two weeks worth of stock on market, which is the inventory levels are super
so
tight.
good luck to anyone actually trying to buy there.
Well, I'm trying to think. We've bought a few properties on market there. Like we obviously buy a lot of property off market. I actually bought a property off market with a 9-month settlement for a client, and then the same week a property across the road went up for sale on market. Same day I called up and said, look, we just bought the property across the road for 8 whatever it was. That was way nicer. We're paying less for this one. And it was kind of like went back and forth. The owners wanted a bit more, but due to circumstances, we managed to buy that one. So we bought 2 properties across the road from each other within a space of weeks, which was you don't do every day. But I guess when you know the market, you can be confident in the valuations because you kind of got an inside line. And again, that property won't settle for another 5 or 6 months now.
So 2-3 months.
Yep. So stuff like that is obviously I guess useful when you know the market like that.
And days on market for Langwarrin are at 22 days, so definitely competitive there.
Yep, and vacancy rate at 1.1%. So again, ticks all our boxes. From a yield perspective, it says 2.81. I would say we're mostly buying 3.8 to 4.1, I would say thereabouts for most of our properties buying there. But again, every property is different. So in summary, just really good market. Lots to like about it. I think it will be one of the best performing markets in Melbourne. It is a $1 million plus suburb. So it'll be one of the first to get on that maybe top 10 list in that price range. I think there'll be some that from a percentage point of view might actually end up doing better because they're just cheaper and percentage-wise grow a lot more. But Langwarrin, I think 3 to 5 years, it's a perfect SMSF location as well.
Before we continue, just a short note from our sponsor.
Property is a powerful way to build wealth, but knowing what to buy, where to buy, and when to act is where most people get stuck. If you're planning your next property move and want clarity, book a complimentary call with Sky Hammer from Convergence Buyers Agents. Sky works one-on-one with his clients using a data-driven approach and on-the-ground insights. He takes the guesswork out of buying and aligns every purchase with your broader strategy. And as a former diplomat, Sky knows how to negotiate confidently and get results. You're never left wondering if you overpaid or bought the wrong asset. To book your complimentary call, visit convergencebuyeragents.com.au or click the link in the show notes.
All right, let's move on to suburb number 5. We're talking about Taylor's Lakes, located 23 kilometres northwest of the CBD, and it's in the Brimbank City Council.
Yeah, it's one of those markets that's done quite a bit. It's been on our radar for quite a while now. We've flirted with the idea of some purchases out that way. If you bought 6 to 12 months ago, you would have done well. Not as well as some of the other suburbs, but hard to fault the market, to be honest. It's a nice little pocket, family friendly, access to kind of major transport ways like Calder Freeway and stuff like that. So direct access into the CBD and surrounds is still quite good.
Yeah, so typical house price there is just over $1 million at $1,020,000. Let's take a look at what the rest of the data says though. So that growth is up 7% in the last 12 months. Rent to owner ratio 10%. Affordability is 40 years to own, so pretty good. Actually, I think that's the second best on this list. Stock on market really tight again at 0.13%.
Yeah, I think it's the feedback we're getting. There's still lots of owner occupiers buying there. Not much stock transacting, but also investors have been quite a few investors getting in there. I know a couple of buyers agencies have, instead of focused on the southeast, they're focused in this pocket. So again, there was some investor, I guess, growth to be made there as well. That whole period, 13 years, obviously quite high, which is great. It's what you want to see. It's higher. And again, this speaks to median house price, but also the incomes in that suburb, which is great. Inventory at 0.6 months. So again, really tight. It's very consistent across this list. And this is what you see when you're in a warm to hot market. You're just going to see really low supply, obviously coupled with strong demand. Vacancy rate up at 2.1%, so a little bit higher than what we like to see usually. But again, it's there's plenty of scope from an investment perspective there.
The days on market, though, is probably an outlier for this list. So it's sitting at 54 days. How do you feel about that, Sky?
I mean, higher than you'd like to see. It's probably speaks to a few other markets that we didn't buy in, like particularly in the west, including in the north. There's that kind of cheap pocket around Broadmeadows, Dallas, Coolaroo, where those days on markets numbers are obviously a lot better. I've done some buying, whereas someone like this, like when I'm looking at Taylor's Lakes, when I'm looking at Langwarrin, similar price points, similar entry prices, I'm choosing Langwarrin 99% of the time. And again, that's just, I guess, knowing the suburb really well and knowing that the types of, I guess, stock that you can get there as well, like really well-built homes, really like that pocket for that reason.
Okay, let's talk about suburb number 6 on this list. We have Doreen. So it's a rapidly growing suburb, 26 kilometres northeast of Melbourne CBD. It's part of the Whittlesea, City of Whittlesea local council area, and typical house prices are at $986,000.
Yeah, yep, it's getting up there in terms of price now. That's actually higher than I expected, to be honest. But it's a nice little kind of, not the entryway, but up in that area where you got good access up to the Yarra Valley, which at this time of the year is great. Obviously into spring as well. It's a really good place to live. I have had some complaints. I did a post, it wasn't on Doreen specifically, but it was a suburb nearby. And it was someone looking to sell their house. So interested to see if we were buying it. And he said that one of the driving forces is because there's just so much tourism at the moment. It's just too busy. Like weekends, the towns are packed because everyone's either stopping just before they get to Yarra Valley or maybe kind of getting petrol or groceries or something on the way back. And so he's actually a bit sick of it. So something to consider. But we're not going to cover them. They're not going to get featured in this report. But up that way, there's a few other suburbs kind of to the east of Melbourne that we're still buying in. They're not on this list because I'd say they're much earlier in their cycle, so they're not in that 7 to 15% window. But if you're heading out east that way, and we'll cover them off in another episode, some really good value. And again, they're in that $900K purchase price. But I just want to flag that because I do like that area, and Doreen's probably the one that made the list. But there's some good stuff happening out that way as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, those that didn't make the list, there is a little bit of clustering there, and we all know you like clustering in your suburbs.
Yeah, exactly. So the data for that kind of entire outer east area is looking really good.
Yeah, I was just going to mention as well, some of the main concerns from residents do seem to be that transport in the area has not kept up with the population growth, but also instances of youth crime. So it seems to be a problem that they're trying to tackle, and the local council is across it, obviously.
I mean, you can almost say that for anywhere in Melbourne at the moment, unfortunately, which again, generally speaking, crime doesn't correlate with capital growth. And I actually had an interesting chat with someone the other day about how, like, I usually said, look, we're across the board, whether that's Melbourne or somewhere else, high crime suburbs doesn't necessarily mean lower capital growth. So I said it doesn't correlate, where it almost is got to a point where it does correlate in the sense that the higher the crime, the higher the capital growth. So people look at it the inverse way, but because of the affordability crisis, because of the lower quartile being the one that moves, it actually is, I would say, this is not data confirmed, but it probably would correlate across a few different parts of Australia, which is an interesting one that I probably should look into and actually do some content on, but just something to keep in mind when people talk about crime. Personally, to live there, maybe a different story, but from an investment perspective, doesn't impact the capital growth potential that much.
Okay, let's take a look at the data. So 986,000 for typical house price. That's up 8% over the last 12 months. So it's pretty across the board with this list. Rent to owner ratio, 21% renters. Nothing wrong with that. Affordability, 40 years to own. Stock on market, really tight again at 0.26%.
Inventory levels 0.77 months. So again, really tight. What we want to see consistent across this list. The whole period's at 8.34 years. So again, not exactly where we wanted to see. I do like to see it above 10 for this kind of price point, but something to track. And days on market at 37 days. So again, a little bit higher than we would like to see, but I think it's been trending down as well. So it's just something to keep an eye on.
Vacancy rate is at 1.4%, so very good there. And the median weekly rent is $500.
Yeah, so 2.64% rental yield, which again, lower than what you want when you look at it on paper. You can get a bit higher, just keep that in mind. But again, it's probably, and I hate to say this, another reason why it's not going to be our number one suburb off this list in terms of working through. But just something to keep in mind there.
Moving through the list, suburb number 7 is Seaford. So this is the third suburb on this list that is in the Frankston LGA.
Mm-hmm.
Typical house prices in Seaford are $927,000. That's actually shot up. So Seaford made our top 10 list last year.
Yeah.
It's had over 10% growth in the last 12 months.
Yeah, and it's not showing signs of slowing. And again, it's not our preferred suburb in that area. We have a lot of clients come to us and say, I want to buy Seaford because it's next to the beach. It's like, that's fine, except there's only a very small pocket of Seaford that is actually beachside without having the highway running through it. And then you move across to, I guess, the side of Seaford that's a bit further away from the beach. And then it almost blends into Frankston North. So you have very distinct pockets of Seaford. So you have the premium side, and then you have like the kind of the middle area, which is generally where we're buying. And then you have the kind of part that borders Frankston North, which again, in some parts does feel like Frankston North when you drive through it. So you've really got to be careful. You can't just do a CMA and say, Seaford, this property was sold for 1.1. Oh, this one's probably similar. When in actual fact, you can still buy properties in Seaford for 700,000. We picked one up for 715,000 at the end of last year. So it really depends on which pocket of Seaford you're buying in. So just keep that in mind when you're looking in the area.
Yeah, and speaking of pockets, there are a few things to consider as well. So flood zones in the area. There's also the creek that runs through there. It's not just the beach. And pockets of social housing, particularly in those areas that border Frankston North. If that's something that you're factoring into your due diligence, then it's definitely a consideration.
But generally speaking, nice suburb, beachside, has a nice feel to it, and most of it. It's still not my favourite, as I said, in that area. I don't know what it is. I can't really put a finger on it, but you're going to get some really good capital growth.
See, I quite like it because I think it has one of Melbourne's best beaches. It's like 5 kilometres, I think, of beach, and it's very crystal clear waters and white sandy beach. You've got the pier there. So I quite like it. It's a bit sleepier, quieter. It's not a hub like Frankston. So you sort of, just a suburb.
It's like, I'm not going back in time, that's a bit harsh.
It feels a bit like that.
It does.
Sleepy.
It's just sleepy, and like the little shops, the fish and chip shop, that type of stuff. It's just
great gelato.
Yeah, it's just a bit like, off's not the right word, but it's just, it feels like going back in time a little bit.
For listeners, Seaford is not off.
No.
There's nothing off about Seaford.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It gives me...
Personal preference.
Yeah, personal preference. Let's just call it that and move into the data. Typical house price now at $927,000. So again, that has moved. It's up about 10%, which is what we want to see. Renter-owner proportion still really good. So 33% renters. So nothing wrong with that there. Affordability index, 42 years to own, which again is completely fine. Stock on market, 0.27%, and inventory levels of 0.89 months. So pretty consistent across the board.
Ticking all the boxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hold period is 11 years, so that's what we like to see. And days on market is sitting at 34, so no concerns there. Vacancy rate really low, 1.1%.
And the yield here is at 3.18%. So it is that little bit higher. And to talk about that property we purchased for $715 in Seaford, one of our better purchases for the year. It was actually for a client who's a builder. So he went in and put in maybe, he did tell me, I can't remember the exact number.
It was all up 40,000.
Yeah.
It was meant to be around 30, but as typical renovations.
He added a bit. So all in, let's call it 750-ish. That's an 800 something property today. So really nice little renovation. And he'll probably be getting it well into the 5s for rent as well. So a nice little rental yield there.
So moving on to suburb number 8, we are looking at Boronia, located 29 kilometres east of the CBD. It's there in the foothills of the Dandenong Ranges. So typical house price in Boronia is $911,000, and that's actually one that made our top 10 list last year as well. So it's here again.
Yeah, and last year was in that kind of cold to warming spot, which we knew there was going to be some good growth. But now obviously that's kind of gone up to another level, and we're moving to that kind of warm to hot spot location. So lots of good growth. And we were talking about Doreen earlier. Boronia was one of the suburbs I was talking about, that kind of outer east before you get to Yarra Valley on the Belgrave line. It's just another one of those ones that I think you're going to be very happy if you get in there, whether you're an owner occupier or investor. Getting in for under 900 still. You can, obviously the typical house price is a little bit higher, but you can. Perfect little suburbia, kind of Melbourne, I guess.
Plenty of shopping
Centres. You've got the Eastland, you've got Westfield at Knox, just lots of options there in terms of kind of shopping, and you could live quite comfortably in and around that area.
Yeah, let's take a look at the data then. So like you said, typical house price at 911. That is up 12% over the last 12 months. So it's no surprise that it made our list last year, especially when Melbourne was really at the start of the growth in a lot of suburbs.
Yep. Yeah, renter to owner ratio, we've got 28% renters. So again, nothing concerning there. Affordability at 43 years. So again, quite good. And I keep looping them together, but yeah, stock on market 0.2%, inventory levels at 0.6%. So again, supply side, there's basically none available. Yeah.
Hold period is 11 years and days on market 28. So ticking a lot of boxes. Vacancy rate also ticking boxes at 1.3%. So no issues getting renters.
Yep. And that renter yield comes in at 3.29%. So again, a bit higher than some of the other suburbs I've spoken about, which again happens a lot when you come down. We're kind of working our way down that list now. We're out of the kind of 1.1s and the low ones into the 900s. So that your rental yield is starting to tick up a little bit, which is what we want to see as an investor.
Okay, moving on to suburb number 9, we have Cranbourne North. So I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this is another suburb that was on our top 10 list last year.
Yeah, and it's been funny because, like I said, we changed what we wanted to do this year to reflect what we're seeing more from potential clients. And what we're seeing is that because they want to buy in these markets, they're mirroring what we kind of bought in some of the suburbs last year. So Cranbourne North, we like Cranbourne North, we like Cranbourne, we like Cranbourne West. We don't like Cranbourne East from a data perspective, but Cranbourne North, again, one of my favourite pockets for this year to be buying.
Yeah, so it's gone up 7.3% in the last 12 months. For those that don't know, it's about 40 kilometres southeast of the CBD, but it's inland, so not like Frankston. So similar distance, but Frankston's obviously beachside. This is inland.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is that kind of push from Frankston, Carrum Downs and surrounds. When people are being priced out of that, they're moving a bit further east. So Cranbourne, Cranbourne North, Cranbourne West is where we're seeing a lot of that money kind of moving to as well.
Plenty of greenlands, parklands. You've got the botanic gardens there.
Yep, there's a big. It might have been that big. I haven't actually been to it. The big children's playground as well. Yeah,
I think it's right near the botanic gardens.
Yeah, okay. It comes on my TikTok all the time, but I've never actually been there, so we should check that out. I'm there so often that we should probably check it out with the kids.
All right, let's see what the data has to say for Cranbourne North. Like you said, typical house price is $885,000. That's up about 7% in the last 12 months. Renter to owner ratio is 26%, no problems there. Affordability at 41 years to own. Stock on market 0.2% and inventory levels at 0.6.
Yeah, the whole period's a bit lower, so at 9.16 years. So again, that's a little bit lower than some of the other ones, but again, it's completely fine. Days on market around 30, which we're happy with as well. Vacancy rate at 1.5%, and that rental yield comes in at 3.15, which again, when we're buying in Cranbourne North and some other Cranbourne, we're getting close to that 4. I'd say more 3.7 to 4.1-ish kind of rental yield for the properties that we're buying at the moment.
Okay, and suburb number 10, our lucky last on this list and the most affordable out of our top 10 suburbs to buy in.
Frankston.
Sure is.
So I didn't think I'd see it on the list. I thought would have moved past Frankston, but it's snuck in there. I think it's only just snuck in there. So its growth over the last 12 months was 13%, and I said we did 7 to 15% to get these kind of warm to hot markets. I would definitely call this a hot market, so it's obviously getting close to that 15%. But all the other data points that we track, monitor, want to see in a suburb are also valid. So it's snuck in the list, which I was pleasantly surprised to see it's still in there. So typical house price now at $861,000. You can get in cheaper than that, but that's getting harder by the day, even just for like a three-bedder, like a nice three-bedders, particularly if they've got 2 bathrooms, I would say are close in the 850 mark now. So getting tougher by the day. We spoke about how much it's grown. The renter-owner proportion's in the kind of high 30s. So it's been around that for a while. It hasn't moved too much from what we've seen so far, but just something to keep an eye on as well, because there has been a lot of investor interest in the suburb.
Yeah, there is still a lot of owner-occupier interest though, and it's pretty clear to see why. So for those that don't know, Frankston is a designated activity centre, so it's a hub in its own right. You've got the hospital there, a state-of-the-art arts centre. It's the end of the Frankston train line, so you can get into the city if you need to go see a footy match or something like that. And it's a lot of people that are moving there are young families. They're trying to get into the Frankston high school zone. So there is a bit of a difference if you are buying in the zone and out of the zone. But there's a lot of other lifestyle factors too, like proximity to the beach is definitely sought after.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and there are some opportunities in that Frankston high school zone still. Like it's tough getting in under 900 now, to be honest, but opportunities do present. Like we had one off market, which we didn't go ahead with, in that kind of 770, 800 range. It just needed too much work, but it had bay views as well of Frankston, which I can't, in the end, I can't believe we didn't buy it, but we're talking 80, 100K worth of works, and that's the exterior, not the interior. So unfortunately, didn't go ahead with it. But there are some interesting opportunities, obviously, in Frankston still.
Any considerations buying in Frankston that people need to be aware of?
I just say the yield. So it's a quite cyclical CC. What happens is that like lots of investors go in, they're buying in the suburb, and then for whatever reason you'll see heaps of rentals come up because they've just bought up for rent the next month. So that vacancy rate looks like it spikes a little bit, but there's still heaps of demand for rentals. And so what happens is that takes a month or so, it gets washed out, and then you see that those properties kind of available for rent in Frankston disappear again. So just keep that in mind when you're buying. It depends maybe which month or even which week sometimes. Your property might be sitting there for a month or so in terms of getting tenants, which isn't always the case, but it does seem to happen sometimes, just depending on the property as well.
Okay, let's take a look at the data then for Frankston.
We did the renter-owner ratio, affordability around 43 years, so it's getting up there as well. Obviously, not everyone in Frankston is on a massive income, so we are seeing that creep up a little bit. Stock on market at 0.23%, inventory levels at 0.6, almost exactly mirroring Cranbourne North, and the whole period at 10.95 years. So again, no issues there.
Days on market are at 31 days, that's the sweet spot, and vacancy rate at 1.1%. So easy to rent out your property generally.
Exactly, and that rental yield now coming in at 3.25%. So look, overall, I really like it. I don't know if it's going to be the best performing suburb on the list. It was last year. I think Langwarrin will get close. I think Cranbourne North will get close. I also really like Boronia as well. So they would be probably my picks off that list. But what about you? What's your number one off that list?
Oh, if I had to personally live there, I'd probably go Chelsea Heights. I'm just a big fan of school zones and making sure, like obviously I work with a lot of owner-occupiers and families. So that's really important for a lot of my clients, but also it's still got that proximity to the beach. Chelsea Heights, I'd say, a bit closer to the CBD.
Perfect. So that was the top 10 suburbs. We got through all those suburbs. I'll just list them quickly just in case you've fast forwarded to the end or you want to get them all. But working down the list from most expensive to least expensive: Sandhurst, Chelsea Heights, Greenvale, Langwarrin, Taylors Lakes, Doreen, Seaford, Boronia, Cranbourne North, and Frankston. So that's a nice little summary there. We will put our top 10 suburbs report in the link in the show notes. So please go check that out if you haven't already. Download that report, check it out. As always, if you've got questions, comments, concerns, general feedback, hit us up in the DMs, send us an email. You can see that in the show notes as well. But until next time, look forward to chatting soon. That's a wrap for this episode of the Melbourne Property Podcast.
If you loved it, hit subscribe and never miss your weekly dose of Melbourne Property Chat.
Please remember this information is general in nature and should not be considered financial advice. If you'd like a more in-depth conversation, book in a call with the Convergence Buyers Agents team and we'll have that conversation with you. The link is in the show notes.
Catch you next time and happy house hunting.